So, is this another pity date, or are you actually planning to talk to me? Rachel asked, her tired eyes locking onto Caleb's. He didn't know it yet, but that single sentence, spoken by a stranger chosen by a dying neighbor, was about to reopen wounds he thought were healed and change his family forever. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Caleb Morgan hadn't meant to open the door. The city outside his apartment was loud even at night, buses hissing, distant sirens, the glow of streetlights bleeding through the curtains. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. 8-year-old Lily lay asleep on the couch, curled around a pillow, her homework notebook still open on her chest. Caleb paused to brush a strand of hair from her face, the familiar ache settling in his ribs. She was the reason he kept going. Some days, the only reason. The knock came again, sharp, impatient. Caleb sighed. He already knew who it was. Mrs. Whitaker stood in the hallway, cane in hand, posture straight despite her age. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, her eyes alert and assessing, as if she'd been waiting for this moment all day. "You look like a man who's forgotten how to live," she said instead of greeting him. "Put this in your kitchen." She handed him a foil-wrapped dish, still warm. "Mrs. Whitaker. And tomorrow," she continued, ignoring him, "you're going on a date." Caleb blinked. "I'm doing what?" "A date. Lakeside Cafe. 7 o'clock. She produced a folded slip of paper and pressed it into his hand. "Her name is Rachel Bennett. Be on time." He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "This is a mistake." "No," she said calmly. "This is necessary." Caleb's fingers tightened around the paper. "I'm not ready. I have Lily." "I don't." "You have excuses," Mrs. Whitaker cut in softly. "And they're slowly burying you." Her voice lost its sharpness then, turning almost gentle. "Your heart didn't stop beating when hers did, Caleb. You don't get to punish yourself forever." The words hit harder than he expected. He looked away, jaw clenched. "If it's awful," she added, "you'll survive an hour. If it isn't, maybe you'll remember who you were before everything broke." She turned and walked back to her apartment without waiting for an answer. The next evening, Caleb dropped Lily off with the sitter downstairs and drove through the city with his shoulders tense, as if he were heading into something dangerous. Traffic crawled along the lake, reflections of light rippling across the dark water. Lakeside Cafe was warm and inviting, soft lights, the smell of coffee and baked bread, quiet conversations drifting through the air. Caleb felt out of place the moment he stepped inside. He took a table near the window and waited. At 7:11, the door opened and a woman hurried in, cheeks flushed from the cold, coat half-buttoned. She scanned the room until her eyes met his. Rachel Bennett approached with cautious steps. "I'm sorry," she said as she sat down. "Work ran late." Her voice sounded tired in a way Caleb recognized. "It's okay," he replied. She studied him for a moment, then exhaled. "I'm going to be honest. I almost didn't come." Caleb nodded. "Same." That earned a small, surprised smile, one that faded quickly. "I was with a patient who passed an hour ago," Rachel said quietly. "Hospice." Caleb swallowed, unsure what to say. She wrapped her hands around her mug as if grounding herself. "Why are you here, Caleb?" "My neighbor," he answered. "Mrs. Whitaker." Rachel's expression shifted, recognition mixed with something deeper. "I thought so." "You know her?" "Better than you think," Rachel said, hesitating. "But not in the same way." Caleb mentioned Lily then, how she was 8, how she was his whole world. Rachel's face softened at the name. "I lost my fiancée," Caleb added after a pause. Saying it still felt like stepping on glass. Rachel met his gaze, eyes steady. Then she chose well, she murmured. Mrs. Whittaker. Caleb frowned. Chose what? Rachel looked toward the window, where the lake shimmered under the streetlights. This, she said softly. Before it was too late. And suddenly, Caleb understood. This wasn't a joke date. It was a final act of kindness, set in motion by someone who knew time was running out. Caleb didn't sleep much that night. He lay awake listening to the city breathe through the walls, elevators humming, a distant argument somewhere below, the low rush of traffic along the lake. Lily had crawled into his bed sometime after midnight, her small hand finding his sleeve the way it always did when she dreamed badly. Caleb stared at the ceiling, Rachel's words looping in his head. Before it was too late. Morning came gray but calm. Caleb walked Lily to school, holding her mittened hand while she talked about a class project involving planets and glitter. She stopped at the gate, looked up at him, and frowned. You're thinking too loud, she said. He smiled despite himself. I didn't know that was possible. It is, Lily replied seriously. Mrs. Whittaker does it too. Caleb froze. What do you mean? She looks sad when she thinks, Lily said, then shrugged. But she's nice. She said you needed help. Caleb watched Lily disappear into the building, her backpack bouncing, and felt something tighten in his chest. That afternoon, his phone rang while he was shelving boxes at work. The number was unfamiliar. Mr. Morgan, a woman asked gently. This is Rachel Bennett. His pulse jumped. Is everything okay? There was a pause, just long enough to mean something. Mrs. Whittaker asked me to call you. She had a rough night. Caleb left work early. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Mrs. Whittaker lay propped up against pillows, thinner than Caleb remembered, her skin almost translucent. Yet her eyes lit up the moment she saw him. Took you long enough, she said. Caleb forced a smile. You didn't tell me you were sick. I didn't want sympathy, she replied briskly. I wanted results. Rachel stood near the window, arms folded, her professional calm masking exhaustion. When Caleb looked at her, she nodded once, confirming what he already suspected. Cancer. Advanced. Weeks, maybe days. Mrs. Whittaker waved Rachel closer. You see, she said to Caleb. I told you she was kind. Caleb swallowed. You planned this. I arranged a conversation, Mrs. Whittaker corrected. What you do with it is your business. Rachel glanced at Caleb, her voice quiet. She didn't want to leave things unfinished. Mrs. Whittaker reached for Caleb's hand with surprising strength. I've watched you bury yourself since Lily was a baby, she said. And I've watched Rachel give every piece of herself to strangers who were dying while forgetting she was alive. I wasn't about to leave this world without trying. Caleb's throat burned. You had no right. She smiled gently. I had love. That's enough. Later, in the hallway, Rachel leaned against the wall, finally letting her composure slip. I promised I wouldn't say anything at the cafe, she admitted. She wanted it to be natural. Caleb nodded. I don't know if I can do this. Rachel met his eyes. I don't know if I can either. But I know Mrs. Whittaker believed we could help each other breathe again. They walked outside together. The lake was calm, reflecting the city lights in long, steady lines. Rachel spoke softly. I stayed in a marriage that emptied me because I was afraid of starting over. When it ended, I thought I'd failed at life. Caleb stared at the water. I stopped living because I was afraid of betraying the past. Rachel looked at him then, not as a nurse, not as a stranger, but as someone standing on the same fragile edge. Maybe this isn't about replacing what we lost, she said. Maybe it's about honoring it by continuing. A week later, Mrs. Whittaker passed quietly in her sleep. At the reading of her will, Caleb and Rachel received identical envelopes. Inside were handwritten letters, messy, determined, unmistakably hers. "Take care of each other," the letter read. "And don't waste the time I no longer have." Caleb folded the paper carefully, his hand steady but his heart pounding. Mrs. Whittaker was gone. But her plan was very much alive. The city didn't pause for grief. Traffic still flooded the streets, office lights blinked on and off, and the lake reflected the skyline as if nothing had changed. But Caleb felt the absence of Mrs. Whittaker in the smallest, sharpest ways: the quiet hallway, the empty space by her door, the pot of flowers she used to water every morning now wilting in the corner. He and Rachel didn't talk for 3 days after the funeral. Not because they didn't want to, but because neither of them knew what the rules were anymore. Mrs. Whittaker had been the bridge. Without her, the distance between them felt wider, more dangerous. It was Lily who closed it. "Why don't you invite Rachel over?" Lily asked one evening as she colored at the kitchen table. Mrs. Whittaker liked her. Caleb glanced up. "You remember that?" Lily nodded. "She said Rachel was tired like you. And tired people need help." Caleb stared at his daughter, struck again by how grief had sharpened her empathy instead of dulling it. That night, he called Rachel. She answered on the second ring. "Hi." "Hi," he replied, suddenly nervous. "Lily wants to meet you." There was a pause, then warmth in Rachel's voice. "I'd like that." They met at the park by the lake on a bright Saturday afternoon. Lily ran ahead, chasing pigeons while Caleb and Rachel walked slowly behind her. The city buzzed around them, but the path felt oddly private. "She's amazing," Rachel said quietly. "She saved me," Caleb answered without hesitation. Rachel nodded. "I know that feeling." Over the next weeks, their time together grew naturally: walks after work, shared takeout, quiet conversations while Lily did homework nearby. Rachel never tried to replace anyone. She listened. She noticed. She stayed. One evening, Lily fell asleep on the couch with her head in Rachel's lap, her breathing soft and even. Caleb watched from the doorway, heart tight. "I'm scared," he admitted later, when Lily was in bed. Rachel didn't look away. "Of me? Of what this could become," he said. "Of losing it." Rachel took a breath. "I'm scared too. I spent years giving everything to someone who left. I don't want to disappear again." Caleb reached for her hand, not dramatically, just enough. "Then don't," he said. "Stay." Spring crept into the city almost unnoticed. The lake softened in color. People smiled more. And slowly, something in Caleb loosened. Rachel began coming over after long shifts, sometimes still in scrubs, sometimes too tired to talk. Caleb learned how she liked her tea, how she hummed when she washed dishes, how she froze at sudden loud noises because hospitals taught you to expect the worst. Rachel learned about Caleb's past, the fiancé he lost, the nights he still woke up thinking he heard her voice, the guilt he carried for surviving. They didn't rush anything. They honored it. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, Caleb found another envelope in Mrs. Whittaker's handwriting. He didn't remember seeing it before. Inside was a single line. "Love isn't about starting over. It's about continuing." Caleb folded the note and walked into the living room, where Rachel was helping Lily with a puzzle. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something he had to fear. It felt like something he could choose. Caleb had learned to recognize the quiet before trouble. It settled in his chest without warning, the same way it used to before bad news. Life had been gentle lately, almost suspiciously so. Rachel laughed more. Lily had started leaving drawings on the fridge again. The city felt brighter, louder, alive. Which was exactly when the past decided to show up. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Rain streaked the windows as Caleb helped Lily with spelling at the kitchen table. The knock at the door was firm, unfamiliar, and far too confident. Caleb opened it, and felt the floor tilt beneath him. Mark Bennett stood in the hallway. Tall, well-dressed, his coat expensive in a way that didn't try to hide it. His hair was darker than Caleb remembered from photos Rachel had once shown him, but his eyes were unmistakable. The man who had walked away. Caleb Morgan? Mark asked calmly. We need to talk. Rachel appeared behind Caleb, frozen. Mark, she whispered. The air in the apartment thickened. Lily looked up, sensing the tension. Who is that? She asked. Rachel swallowed. Someone from my past. Mark stepped inside without being invited, glancing around like he was inspecting a life he'd once discarded. You didn't tell me you were playing house, he said, voice sharp. With a kid. Caleb's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. Mark smirked. Relax. I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm here because Rachel and I are still legally married. The words landed hard. Rachel closed her eyes. I told you it was over. You disappeared, Mark snapped. Left me with nothing but bills and rumors. And now I hear you're living with some widower and his daughter? Caleb stepped forward, anger steadying him. She's a nurse. She didn't disappear. She survived. Mark scoffed. You don't know her. Rachel laughed once, broken but fierce. You never wanted to. Mark's gaze shifted to Lily, who stood silently by the table. This isn't healthy, he said. You dragging a child into your unresolved mess. Caleb felt something old and dangerous stir. Get out. Mark turned back to him. I'm filing to settle things. Properly. And if that means court, so be it. When the door slammed behind him, the apartment felt smaller. Rachel sank onto the couch, hands shaking. I thought I was done being afraid. Caleb knelt in front of her. You're not alone anymore. That night, Lily crept into their room again. He was mean, she whispered. Mrs. Whitaker wouldn't like him. Caleb smiled sadly. No, she wouldn't. The weeks that followed were tense. Papers arrived. Calls went unanswered. Mark's lawyer pushed for reconciliation, then compensation, then threats. Rachel doubted herself. Maybe I should step back, she said one night. I don't want to drag you and Lily into this. Caleb shook his head. Running didn't save you before. Standing might. At the courthouse steps, Rachel squeezed Caleb's hand. I don't know how this ends. Caleb looked at the city rising behind them, solid and unyielding. Honestly, he said, kindly, and without lying. Rachel breathed out. For the first time, she believed him. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The courtroom was colder than Caleb expected. Not because of the air conditioning, but because truth always felt like that, sterile, bright, impossible to hide in. Rachel sat beside him, shoulders tight, hands folded so neatly Caleb could see how hard she was working not to shake. Across the aisle, Mark Bennett looked composed, almost bored, like this was paperwork he wanted finished before lunch. Caleb kept his focus on Rachel. This wasn't his battle, but he wasn't leaving her to fight alone. Mark's lawyer painted a neat picture, a wife who abandoned the marriage, a husband who suffered reputational harm, and now a new relationship that proved Rachel had simply moved on without consequences. Rachel's face went pale, but her chin stayed lifted. When it was her turn, she stood slowly. Her voice at first was quiet, then steadier with every sentence. I didn't abandon him, she said. I escaped a life where I wasn't allowed to be a person. I worked double shifts, paid the bills, took care of his mother when she was sick, and when I finally broke down, he told me I was inconvenient. Mark's smile twitched. Rachel continued. I asked for counseling. He refused. I asked for kindness. He laughed. And when I started hospice work, the first time I came home and cried after losing a patient, he said, if you can't handle death, stop pretending you're important. Caleb felt his fists clench under the table. Mark shifted, irritated. That's not what happened. Rachel turned toward him, calm and sharp. Then tell the truth. For once. Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The judge listened without expression, then asked Rachel one question that seemed to cut through everything. Why didn't you file sooner? Rachel swallowed. Her eyes flicked to Caleb, then down. Because I was ashamed. I thought if I admitted it was broken, it meant I was broken too. Caleb stood when it was his turn, not as a hero, not as a savior, just as a man who'd learned what honesty cost. He told the judge what he'd witnessed, the calls at night, Rachel flinching at threats, the way she tried to step away to protect Lily. He spoke about Lily's attachment, but more importantly, about Lily's safety. This isn't a woman running away, Caleb said. This is a woman finally standing still long enough to be found. Then something unexpected happened. Mark's lawyer introduced a final exhibit, an envelope, addressed in Mrs. Whitaker's handwriting, delivered with her estate papers. Caleb's stomach tightened. The judge allowed it to be read. Inside was a short statement, notarized weeks before Mrs. Whitaker died. Rachel Bennett has been my hospice nurse. I have seen her kindness when no one is watching, her patience when she is exhausted, her integrity when she is afraid. I arranged that date because I believed she deserved a safe home and a family that honors her. If anyone claims she is dishonest, they do not know her. There was a hush in the courtroom. Rachel's eyes filled instantly. Caleb felt the sting in his own. Mrs. Whitaker had planned for this too. Mark's face hardened. She manipulated everything, he snapped. The judge's gaze sharpened. No, Mr. Bennett. It appears she told the truth. The ruling came quickly, the divorce finalized, Mark's claims denied, a protection order granted based on documented harassment. The judge's voice was firm, final. Outside the courthouse, the city air felt warmer. Rachel stepped onto the sidewalk like someone learning to walk in sunlight again. She turned to Caleb, breath-catching. She saved me, she whispered. Caleb nodded. She saved all of us. That evening, Lily met them at the door with a drawing in her hand, 3 stick figures holding hands, and a fourth with gray hair and a cane drawn like a guardian angel in the corner. I made Mrs. Whitaker too, Lily said quietly. So she's still here. Rachel knelt, tears spilling now without shame. Thank you, sweetheart. Months passed. On a bright spring day by the lake, Caleb proposed, not with fireworks, but with steady hands and an honest voice. Rachel said yes, smiling through tears, Lily bouncing beside them like joy couldn't be contained. They married in a small ceremony with the city skyline behind them and the lake shining like a promise. Caleb kept one chair empty in the front row, a single white rose resting on it. Mrs. Whitaker's seat. And as Caleb watched Rachel take Lily's hand, he understood the real twist of it all. A joke date hadn't been a joke. It had been one woman's last act of love, proving that kindness doesn't end when someone is gone. It echoes. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.